Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another week of Crunching Your Growth. I'm Phil Masiello, and today we're digging into a subject that I never had on this show. And I've always been a little, I don't know, apprehensive about it or, on the fence about it. But I think it might be a great way for entrepreneurs to get started in business and have a jumping off point. And it's franchise ownership. And my guest today is Chuck Stovall. He's an entrepreneur, a multi-unit franchise operator, and a consultant he's owned and operated more than 30 locations across multiple brands, including Massage Envy, Boost Mobile, Image Studios. And he's really built businesses, scaled them, managed the chaos that comes with growth, and even navigated the private equity exit. And so, I've always had this thing, and it's in my head. I know it. I know it's not rational, but it's always in my head that entrepreneurs, they have to come up with the idea, they have to start it, and they have to do it, themselves, and blah 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 blah. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I think what I learned from Chuck in the conversations that we've had is that he. He speaks from that experience and he helps people decide really whether franchise ownership is truly the right move for them. And he's not afraid to tell someone when it isn't. And so it's going to be a really cool conversation, I think, about franchises and how to get started with franchises and how to be a good franchise entrepreneur. So let's bring him in and let's hear what he's got to say. Hey, Chuck, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thanks, Phil, for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Why don't you give us a little bit of background, take us through your history, what you've done, how you've gotten to where you are today?
Yeah, certainly. So, I started my journey a lot like other people start their journeys, which is in corporate America. And, I was kind of passed over a couple of promotions, and really it was that moment where I'm like, I'm not sure that climbing a corporate ladder is something that I want to do. I don't know if it fit my personality, and a lot of smoozing that had to go on. So me and a college buddy decided that we were going to open up a cell phone store in the mountains of Virginia. And our whole idea was to, make an extra $1,000 a month or something like that. And maybe we could get our wives something nice. And so, it quickly that turned out to be the number one store in the nation for Boost Mobile, and we quickly grew to 20 locations over the next 5 years. And
Wow.
a lot of times, people would ask me as as they look back on that journey that I had over those 5 years with Boost Mobile was like, why grow to 20? What was really that driving factor? And ultimately it was the employees. It was really offering them a career path that I didn't have. And not saying no to people and like saying, yeah, let's give you a path to grow. And ultimately we sold that business to private equity at that time, who was buying into Boost Mobiles, and so we exited. But also in my mind, I'd rationalized it to where I was also giving them an opportunity to grow with the bigger company.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I was in cell phones like my whole life. Like that was my life before I opened up my store, and I was in sales, and so I kind of was like, all right, that happened. Do I just go back to corporate America? And my wife looked at me and kind of laughed, like, you'll never go back to corporate America, so I didn't know what to do, and I sat around for about 6 months trying to figure out the next thing. This concept of not having to come up with my own thing, you kind of mentioned it in your opener, which is like, I think a lot of people struggle. Like they really want to come up with something that's their baby and nurture it and see it grow. And franchising takes that away. It takes that birthing part away. Like, so now
Yeah.
they're like, you kind of just give it a game plan, and sometimes that's not sexy to people.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't their idea. And I was kind of like the opposite. I'd seen it happen. I was familiar with the cell phone space. I didn't wake up one day like, can't wait to sell cell phones, you know. So I decided, like, I think plugging myself into a system because I'm a people person, and that was kind of what I figured out. Like, I'm not the idea guy. I have a lot of cool ideas, I think, but I'm not sure I'm the idea guy. But I'm a people person, and I can
Yeah.
execute on things. And so, so I kind of transitioned from Boost Mobile into the massage envy world, and that was a much bigger corporate set system, you know, based out of Scottsdale, and we started with we bought into a couple locations. We opened a couple locations. We ended up with 7 in the state of Virginia, and yeah, you know, like we operated those for about 6 years. You know, we braved through the COVID, and you know, massage wasn't really, you know, booming in the COVID days, and so we had to really kind of navigate that. And you kind of mentioned it in the opener again, like it was chaos. You know,
Yeah.
there was chaos with the Boost Mobiles. There was chaos with the Massage Envy, and again, when I'm advising people on getting into franchising, it's just you got to choose your hard. You know, like it's going to be hard. It's going to just depend which way you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, you know, we landed on Massage Envy. We another private equity exit with the company that was buying Massage Envies, and yeah, you know, that kind of led me down this path of consulting, and since being another franchisee with a company called Image Studios. And so, but you know, Image Studios is a brand that kind of allows me to focus on my consulting and really helping people navigate franchise ownership. And like you said in your opener, you know, talking people out of it, you know, and that's, you know, a lot of people aren't meant for business ownership, or they're meant for what your first thing was, which is they want the idea, you know, they want to bring it to life, and that's okay, you know, like it's hard to sell somebody on a concept that wasn't theirs from origination, you know, so yeah, that's
Yeah.
been my journey.
Yeah. I think that you know, it depends on the type of person that you are, I think, because there's also been a lot of franchisees that wound up coming up with their own concept, right? So, like Panera Bread is a good example of that because the franchisee was not Vita France, but was it Vita? No, it wasn't Vita France. It was the other one from. Anyway, it was the one out of Boston. It was a French bakery concept, and it was getting stale. It was around for decades, and it was getting stale. And the franchisee, you know, saw a different way, and he opened up the first Panera Bread. I think it was in St. Louis, Missouri, and then he invited the founders of Obon Pan. That's what it was, and he invited those guys down, and they liked it, and they wound up, you know, helping him scale that thing and
Yeah.
turn it into a franchise. So, you know, so I mean, there's a million ways because sometimes it'll spark an idea. I'm just not. I don't know. I mean, I've looked at it a bunch of times, but I think I don't know if I could be constrained by you got sort of have to do what the process is, you know, whether you like it or not, and you know, you get dinged for if you try and go out of the lane, and I don't know. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but I do know a lot of people that have been great at it. It's just my mentality. It's, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just the way that my mind is.
Yeah, you know, and it's going to depend on when you get into the system, you know. And so, like, if you were an early adopter, an emerging concept, I think what a lot of these franchisors are seeing is that not every market is, you know, replicable, you
Yeah,
know. And
yeah,
so, so if you're able to get in early, and a lot of the brands that we deal with as consultants are emerging concepts, you know, so they're looking for their initial franchisees, their first 10, 20, or, you know, maybe they have 50 of them open already, and they're looking for, you know, to grow to 100 or 200. And, you know, a lot of people that we place are who are early adopters in these concepts, you know, have a relationship with these founders, you
yeah,
know, and they really help them even develop their systems more, and like they do in other markets. Some people like that Some people don't. Some people are, that pioneer. They have that mentality where they're like, yeah, I want to launch this. I love this product. I like this. I want to be a part of something bigger, and they can do it. And then for other people, it's not. They want. I need 600 of them open. I need it proven, and I need a exact playbook, and I don't want to go outside the lane. I need it to be a Chick-fil-A, or I need it to be something that I'm very familiar with. And it's just that's not what all the options are in the franchise world. There's a lot of different opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a different way of going about it when when you want to be like a master franchisee, right? And you want to open up a territory and you say, look, I want to be, I want to open up 10, 15 of these in my area. And then you're really not operating on the unit level. You're sort of operating on a bigger level,
Right.
which is, yeah, that's certainly a way to go about it. And that's, a lot of that's a real estate play, but, I have a friend who he was he was he was in the corporate world and he just got burned out, and what he really liked was playing with his dogs, and so he he opened up a store somewhere in the suburbs of Pittsburgh called the Dog Stop, and he set it up and he was running it himself, and they were doing like dog grooming and overnight dog sitting and all, it was a retail store as well, and he really liked it, and he figured out a model, and then he started franchising it, and now I think he's got 100 locations, 100 franchise locations, and he figured out how to get it done. And I said to him, I thought that the constraint in that would be the dog grooming, because how are you going to find an owner that wants to do dog grooming? And he said, there's so many like dog grooming franchises out there, especially the mobile ones. He said, and all these dog groomers think they want to be in business for themselves. And what they find out is once they get into business, they're miserable. So there's dog groomers that just want to be dog groomers. He said, and they're all over the place. So you hire the dog groomer, the owner of the place just manages everything. And he's been quite successful with it. And he's happy.
Yeah, we actually have the Dog Stop in our inventory. They're managed by a company called the Repham Group, and they recently rolled out into our inventory. So they're a perfect example of somebody who has like 100 open. They're looking to kind of grow into their next 100 or their next 100 after that. So yeah, absolutely. And he's right. Like I dealt with the same thing with massage, where a lot of people go into the massage business. And they're like, I'm going to open up my own massage place, and I'm going to have people, and I'm going to have my own schedule. And then the next thing you know, they have to create a schedule. They have to have an app. They have to take the payments. They have to do the linens. They have to do all this stuff. And then they're like, oh wait, I just want to do massage, And,
Right.
and yeah, and so it's very similar. We had a lot of people that would walk out the door as massage therapists, and I'd sit down with them and try to do the math. And like, hey, like. You walk into a full book every day. You walk out without having to do the linens.
Yeah.
And if you start equating that into your equation, I'm not sure that you're going to really make that much more money, if more money at all. And so he's right. Like sometimes those people have that mentality. They just need to show up to work, they do what they're trained at, and then go home and be able to cut everything off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have dogs and I like dogs. And I was saying that I was talking about it. I was saying, it's so hard for me to find a groomer because I don't want to take my dogs and drop them off. I don't understand why you need to have my dogs for like 8 hours. It just doesn't make sense. And I have one dog that's very, very, has anxiety, can't put her in a crate. And so I said, they used to have like a mobile groomer, but for some reason they can never make it. They can never make it a business, right? And one of the things that he was saying was it's a good business. The problem is these groomers come in, they buy the van, they do the mobile grooming, but they're terrible marketers. So now they have to figure out how to get more clients. They have to figure out how to schedule the clients. They have to figure out taking payments. They have to do all the work. And they don't want to do that. They just want to groom dogs all day. And there's another guy that I know, you probably know of him, a guy named John Hewitt. His father and he started Jackson Hewitt Tax, and
Yeah.
now he's got, I don't know, he's got some franchise, master franchise company. He's got a whole bunch of brands that he franchises. One of them is a mobile dog grooming thing, and I think that the obstacle there is the same thing. He hasn't been able to grow that one as fast because, again, you get these mobile groomers to make the investment in the truck and everything, but they don't stick with it because they have to be marketers, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's like it's a little tougher to make money with routing, so you kind of need a dense population, like if you
Yeah.
are driving 10, 15 minutes every appointment, well, that's, at the end of the day, that's 3 appointments that you could have done extra at a mobile grooming place or at a regular grooming place, and so if, so you're kind of losing out on some revenue. So, if you have the opportunity to kind of get some dense area, dense population, like those types of concepts can work whenever the mobile groomers are having to drive all around. But there's additional liability there with, the mobile groomers driving around and,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. I just preferred it just because I have a dog that's anxious. So we wound up taking it over ourselves. We just go and
Yeah.
do it ourselves because she's just a maniac. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I have some friends that own franchises and do quite well. Got in early and like Subway and have like 4 or 5 Subway stores in the New York area and things like that, which I think are great. Food is always a big one, right? Like the Dunkies and, those kinds of places. But now you can't touch them because now it's, they're so big that they just want like master franchisees,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
guys that are going to develop 50 locations.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that's like kind of a misconception too that a lot of people have when they're looking at franchises. They think about the big guys. They think about the Subways, the Chick-fil-A's, everything that you and I see on the side of the road. And then there's this whole other category, and those are the people that we typically help. Or, like we help a lot of people get into those types of businesses, the brick and mortar.
Yeah.
But, those are usually out of reach for people, not everyone, but a lot of people. They're the capital outlay and to be able to have enough runway to make it can be not sustainable for a majority of Americans. And so we kind of operate in this other category where it's non-food and like unsexy, boring businesses that, are franchises that you and I may not be familiar with as everyday consumers.
Yeah.
Like a lawn doctor or the Mosquito Joe, or the Mr. Electric, like those types of things where, you have brands that, have really good systems and processes. They have call centers in place. They're booking your appointments. They're taking your calls. They're doing all this stuff for the franchisee. But the capital outlay doesn't cost as much because you're just investing in a person and in a van and maybe it's some marketing dollars.
Yeah.
So it gives people that sniff of entrepreneurship in the franchise world where they can plug themselves in without having to spend $500,000 on a build out.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another guy I met, and this one was amazing to me. He focuses on shutters, exterior shutters for houses. Primarily, he does like the coasts, and it's a franchise. It's a franchise concept, and it was amazing to me because I thought to myself, how could you make a living? How could you make a living at that? But I guess in the right areas, it's it's a good business.
Yeah, certainly down here in Charleston, and like people don't, that I don't even know that the shutters necessarily are made for hurricanes anymore. I know the hurricane shutters, but they're for privacy and for looks and
Yeah.
and all that as well. So, but yeah, there's so many concepts that are out there. I mean, they have franchises that revolve around crime scene cleanup.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just about everything that you can think about.
Yeah, sure. Service master, come in and clean up after disasters, and
Yeah.
there's a million different ones that it is funny. You don't think about them, but I guess if you're there's some that you think about the skills transfer, right? Like if you're a guy who's good with his hands and he can do building and things like that, like he could take like the shutter concept and then he can expand on it and do some other things with it. But I'm not good with my hands. I can't. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be good like those handyman franchises. It wouldn't be good.
But it's funny. So like you're the perfect example, Phil. Like, so this is great, because like you're the perfect example of a very typical candidate that I would get. This is somebody who's like would come in. I don't know about franchising, and I don't know about this, and I don't know about that. Like, and I don't think I'd be good at this, and I don't think, and like, and people are like waiting for something as I show them opportunities to jump out off the page at them. Like, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah,
Well, we'd never find anything for you, and only because like you have to go into this, one, you're not going to do the work, but two, you have to look at every opportunity in franchising like a puzzle. Okay, and like how am I going to figure out this puzzle? And it's not going to is it like franchising, it's like 40% solved. You got to go solve the other 60% of it.
right.
And like that's the mentality you got to bring into it. You're the first thing that you think about is I'm not good with my hands, I can't do that. An entrepreneur in the franchising space, okay, will say, how can I figure out how I don't have to do that but still make money?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you're 100% correct. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was talking about with the dog concept because, I was thinking, well, that's the first thing I thought of was, oh my God, you're gonna have to find targeted people that are groomers because that's the biggest problem. And he's like, no, we just need people. You're gonna hire the groomer. You're gonna hire the people that are gonna do it. All you're doing is managing the concept and doing the marketing. And that's the part because I
Yeah.
do know the marketing, and that's the part that I don't think about. I don't sit there because I take for granted, okay, Massage Envy, they're running television commercials, they're doing the lead gen for you, and all you have to do is,
Right.
but there's a lot of franchises that you do have to do the marketing for, and but I just never. It doesn't come up, right? It doesn't come up for me. I think to myself, well, I don't need the franchise. I can just do, if I wanted to do that, I could just go and build it. But,
Totally. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
No, right. And there's no doubt. And I get that a lot too. And I hear a lot of people say that, like, I'll just go do it. I'm like, great. You should go do it. Like you should go build something for yourself. And because I think like people again have the misconception of what a franchise offers. Okay. And so these are a couple things that maybe your audience can take with them that a franchise offers that they may have not thought about. Okay. And so one is going to be other franchisees, other people who are operating the same exact business under the same brand name that you have across America. Okay. And you being able to pick up the phone and have people who are doing the same exact thing in the same growth phase that you are and being able to trade ideas. Now, if you were to open up your own shutter company or whatever, like who you calling? Maybe you could probably figure it out. You're a bright guy. You could probably figure it out. But there's not a lot of franchisees that can. They want to have that support network. They want to have accountability groups. They want to help themselves grow together. So that's one. Two is an exit. And that's kind of what I leveraged. There's private equity and there's other franchisees that are operating the same business under the same flag that you have, and so you're like, hey, I've had a life event happen, or I'm kind of done with this brand. I've made my money. I'm ready to move on to my next chapter. Who am I going to sell to? Again, if it's just, Phil's paint store, it's not going to be, you're not going to have a lot of suitors, but maybe if you had the Sherwin-Williams or you had something that's nationally known with other people in the area, those are your first people you call, and so there's exit opportunities that come quicker with franchising because your buyers are in your backyard, they're in your neighboring town, and so those are some things that people don't typically think about. And again, the franchise is not for everybody, but there's definitely some opportunity for the right people who come into it with the right mindset, who put their financial resources into the right place, and that's really the most important thing, is making sure they're not stretching themselves too thin, make sure they have enough capital runway if things go south or don't go as planned, and make sure that they understand what the next year looks like for them as far as time commitment, the expectations set by the franchisor, and being able to commit their life to that business and run through walls to make it work.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. I just forgot about this, and now I'm Now I'm remembering when I met my wife, she owned two Littlest gyms, and they were franchises. She started out with one, and you were talking about learning from others. Before they let her open her gym, she had to go work with this guy in Pennsylvania that owned, I think, four or five Littlest gyms, and he explained like the process and how they make, how to make money and how to market and how to do all these things, because it wasn't just getting kids in there to, do athletics. It was all about the birthday parties and the groups and the mommies and all that. And she was opening in Atlanta, and she did well. She did really, really well, and she had two of them, and she loved it. She loved the whole process. She followed the process. She stayed in communication with whoever the franchisor was, and then all these other people that really helped her build it and grow it. And she wound up selling it. And it was because it was time, and she wanted to move back up this way, and it was great. And I was talking to my friend, a couple of weeks ago about the dog stop. And then I started thinking, boy, I could do that. Would be a good way to retire for me, because I could have a store where I would just play with dogs all day, and it would be fantastic. I'd have a groomer, I'd have all these other people, and all I did was play with dogs. That would be great,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, and I again try to caution people sometimes that, be careful about getting into businesses that you're passionate about.
I know.
It's because you may quickly lose that passion.
Yeah, that's a funny thing, because you always hear a lot of coaches in my world of entrepreneurship and stuff. A lot of coaches sit there and say, "Oh, follow your passion, follow your passion," and I never followed my passion. My passions were always different than the businesses I started. I started skincare and personal care and food and things like that, and I was speaking to a woman last week who built a floral business. She does amazing. She's like $100 million a year company. Started her from scratch, didn't take a dime of private equity. I mean, really, really built this thing tremendously. And she said the same thing. She said, my passion is ceramics. But if I started a business around my passion, ceramics, I'd grow to hate it. I like flowers, I like the decorating and all that, but to me, it's a business, and I think about it in terms of the business, but my passion is, ceramics, and I'm not going to start a business around that. And it makes so much sense. And it goes sort of back to the discussion about the dog groomers. People are passionate about being a dog groomer, and then you buy a franchise to become a mobile dog groomer, and then you wind up hating it because you have to do the marketing and you have to become the business person,
Yeah.
So yeah, you're 100% right.
It's the same thing. I mean, you were kind of alluding to this, but it's like what I share with people, like what franchising is, or what you did with the skincare. It's like, franchising should be a vehicle to allow you to spend more time in your passions.
Yeah.
So like, how can I build a business that's going to allow me the freedom and the flexibility to do the things I love? And so that's what I do as a franchise matchmaker, is to try to help people understand the life that they want to live, and then let's see if we can work from that result backwards, and then find the franchise that matches that. And that's what you want to do. Like, franchising is about the lifestyle. It's a lifestyle business. You're giving up some of your profits to the franchise. A lot of people don't like that. But that's why it's really important to find the right one that you feel comfortable with, that knowing that that business can run without you.
Well, I mean, if the franchisor is doing the right things with the money, and they're marketing and they're helping and they're building, then it's worth it, because they're also doing some of the thinking for you. And if they're giving you a system, when you start a business from scratch, I come up with an idea. I start a business. I have to go through the pain and agony of, minimum viable product market fit, then developing the system to scale, right? If you buy a franchise, they've already sort of worked all that out. They come to you and say, okay, this is what you need. This is the demographics you need. This is the population you need. This is the type of location you need. They'll even help you find the location. This is like how to sign the lease. They do all that work for you, so you don't have to make all those mistakes yourself, because let's face, the most difficult part of a business is that first couple of years when you're trying to figure out how to scale. So they're sort of giving you a scaling system that they've already worked out. Now you just have to follow the plan and do your own marketing to build. What you're really trying to do is build your customer base, right?
Yeah.
Make sure you get customers in the door, and especially if it's something like, a pet business. And then I could do that, and to me, that's what I think about. I think, okay, I can market that, but at the same time, while I'm marketing that, I could spend my day, playing around with dogs, and I'd be, and I'd sort of be happy with that. But, you know, because I have looked at like franchises and things, but for some reason, whenever I think about franchises, I always migrate to the food side, which is always the most difficult ones.
Totally, yeah. Well, we're consumers of the food ones, and
Yeah,
we see people walking into the food ones and buying the food, and then we like the food, and we're happy after we leave, and
yeah,
so like that's why most people are familiar with those because when ServPro shows up, we're not happy.
yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also like you said, it's also a lifestyle. Like Surf Pro, it's a 24-hour a day business. Somebody could be calling you up saying, "Oh my God, I've got a problem now," and you've got to get there and help them, or some of these other businesses. Whereas the food businesses, you're sort of, it was funny. A friend of mine a couple of years ago bought a donut franchise, one of the a smaller donut franchise, not like a Dunkin', but I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, Duck, is it Duck Donuts? Or?
It was something out of New York State. It was like something upstate New York, and basically, it was fairly inexpensive. But he opens it up, and I think people have this idea that, okay, I bought a franchise, I'm going to open it up, and people are just going to come, and it's just going to be okay. And I'm looking at the hours, and it's like, we're going to open up, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday from 8 a.m. to like, noon. I'm thinking, when I saw it, I sent him a message and I said, listen, I don't want to be negative, but I don't think you're going to make it in that amount of time. You sort of have to do 7 days a week. You got to be open at 6 a.m. You got people going to work. You're missing it. You're going to sell coffee. He's like, well, we just don't. We're at the end of our careers, and we just want to. I'm thinking, well, you just bought a franchise, and I don't think you're going to do so well. And sure enough, like a year later, he's got the thing up for sale, and I'm like, man. Because you
Yeah.
can't it's still a business. You still have to work the business. You can't just say, oh, well, it's a franchise, I'm going to buy it and then sit back. I think that's a mistake people make, is they think it's just going to do the work itself just because I hang the shingle up that says, whatever, dog stop, people are going to come. You still have to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a total misconception that people will have is, okay, you know how many phone calls I've had where there's a guy who is on the other end and he sits behind a desk and he can't answer his phone, but he wants to buy a franchise, and and I'm like, okay, well, what does your schedule look like? Like how, like what does your day look like? He's like, oh, I'm on the computer. I got to pick up phones, and I don't really have time to talk to anybody. But I can do it at at 7 o'clock at night, and my weekends are free. I'm like, well, you don't just kind of own a business,
Yeah.
like like this isn't. And people just have this misconception that maybe if I just put money into something and unfortunately there's franchisors out there that will take that guy's money.
Oh, sure.
And they will say, yeah, of course you can absolutely run this absentee and not ever have to pick up the phone, and that's kind of why consultants like me exist, is to try to help people navigate that process, and really set the right expectations so that if that first phone call they make to the franchisor is, hey, yeah, you're good, you don't have to be there, and the franchisor is going to run it for you. That's not going to be the case.
Yeah, I don't know any business that you don't have to be there with it. I that's what kills me about, the concept of a side gig. It's like, it drives me insane, because you look at these articles and people get sucked in. It's like, oh, Jane started a side gig on a Saturday, and by Tuesday she was making, $2 million a day. And you're like going, dude, there's no such thing as a side gig. You're either in or you're out. You can't be in part of the way. Now, what you could do, and there's been some great examples of this, where People have started like blogs and vlogs and things on the weekends, in their spare time. And then as they grew their audience over 4 or 5 years, then they can start selling products out of it, right? Glossier is a perfect example. She was doing blogging of beauty products for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And then she built up a following of like 1 million followers before she launched her first product. And then as soon as she launched her first product, she quit her job and that's what she did full time. And very successful at it. She's $1 billion company now. That I can see. But I can't see this whole side gig thing. And too many people, I think, get sucked into the Amazon seller world and say, oh, I'm going to start selling, on Amazon and I'm going to be a millionaire in a week. And like, yeah, good
Yeah.
luck, buddy.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, it's the influencers are to blame. That's no doubt. They just like, yeah, they're selling their course,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Selling their
yeah,
course.
yeah.
So yeah, it's but it is funny. But I was just thinking, and I have a great idea for you, and you should pitch this. You have to frame it, but you should pitch it, and I
Okay.
think you'd be great at it. Is you were saying, I'm basically like a matchmaker. People come to me and they want a franchise, and I sit there and try and figure out the best place to put it. That could be a television show because, like you said, you've got these people, right? You've got these people that are calling you up that just have these big misconceptions, and I think it would be hysterical because it's like the matchmaker, the love matchmaker, whatever her name is, where she's got people coming and she's trying to match them with, oh, I want to marry a millionaire.
Yeah.
You could get people that I'm sure people come in and say, yeah, I want to be a millionaire. I want to run a franchise. Find me the franchise that's the most profitable, right?
Yeah.
It could be a funny show, I think.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious. Yeah, I know. Well, that's exactly what people think, That's exactly what people think that we do, I'm like, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to $1 million like next week, and like it's funny because like is that you bring this up. I had this conversation 2 times today where, like what people want from me, and it's not their fault, okay? Like, but what people want from me, they want to call me and they want to say, just tell me the best franchise, and then I'm going to tell you whether it was good enough or not.
Yeah.
And like, okay, and so like, and what I really want to do is flip the script on people, and are they ready,
Right.
and like, let's take the brands out of the equation. If you want a brand, we have the internet. Okay, the internet has plenty of information. There's thousands of brands on there. What the internet's not going to tell you is if you're ready.
Right.
Are you ready to be a business owner? And that's where people are like, well, what does that mean? Of course I'm ready. I have this and I have that, and I'm buying it for my wife. Okay, where's your wife? She's not. That's not important.
Yeah.
Like, it is if you're buying her a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these are the conversations I have every day, and where people just they want to dictate, they want to drive the car, and that's completely fine. But there's a lot of misinformation out there, and what we do as consultants is like, yeah, I'm going to match you with a brand, but that's like the last thing I do. And what we need to do is figure out if this is right, and then we need to put a financial picture together. What's that game plan going to be? What's that first 6 months going to look like? All right, now that I have a better understanding of that, now I can look at franchises, and then I show them something, and it wasn't a Chick-fil-A, and they're all sad, and but we're trying to make sure that we're putting the right people with the right opportunities, and that way it gives them a pathway to success. And if they don't like it, if they don't like the brands that I pick, that's okay, but like I just try to encourage people, like, have some fun with it. It's fun to look at different businesses. It's fun to kind of put your feet in some waters
Yeah.
and learn about different opportunities. And as you kind of navigate this process, you'll figure out if it's the right fit for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
no question about it. I think you got to give people a dose of reality. It's the same thing in the startup world. People have an idea. So I have an idea, so I'm going to make it a business, and I think it could be a great business, and it's going to be $1 million business. So show me how to raise money so I can get the business going. And I go, Well, you don't have anything to raise money on. Nobody's going to back you. You have no track record. You've never done it before. Well,
Yeah.
so and so raised $10 billion on a business plan. Yeah, so and so raised $10 billion on a business plan because so and so started this company first, and everybody exited out healthily. He started this company, and so he's got a track record. So yeah, and he put his own couple of billion into it. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. This is exactly it. Where people, they're idea guys. Then and what I'm looking for are execution guys.
right.
Who can execute. And who can figure out these puzzles. Because that's what it is. It's a puzzle. And like I can place somebody. It's funny here in Charleston. We had a concept. I placed a guy in called fish window cleaning. It's just a window cleaning business, and they have very successful franchisees across America. And I think they've had 2 franchisees here that didn't make it, and and that shuttered or closed the doors, and or whatever happened to them, whether it was life events they closed, whatever it was. And then I placed a guy here who immediately was successful.
Yeah.
Same market, same brand. And it was the same opportunity. And it was funny. I'd go to the gym. There he was knocking on doors.
Yeah.
I'd go to the grocery store. There he was. There's his van. There he is. And
He just out hustled everybody.
out hustled everybody. And that's what you got to do. You got to be ready. And I would never take credit for that. But what I do is I want to set that expectation with people. Like this is what you're going to have to do. And if they don't have the right consultant, or if people aren't working with the right person, and they don't have that expectation going into it, then they're just going to think, hey, I'm going to write a check. I'm going to hire some guy. That guy's going to ride around. And he's going to knock on doors, and he's going to sign up accounts, and we're just going to start making money.
Yeah.
And that's not the way it's going to work.
No, it never works that way. You still have to hustle. You still have to execute. You still have to run the business. You can't run it from, your office somewhere else. You have to keep your eye on the business. And, to me, any business, I don't care what business it is, it all comes down to marketing. You've got to get people in the door, right? It doesn't matter what the business is. Or if, like your window cleaning guy, you don't have to get people in the door. You got to get yourself out to get those people. You got to get in their door, and
Right.
you're not going to do it from, making phone calls or getting behind the computer or doing, ads on the computer. It's not going to happen that way. You got to go banging on doors and say, who's cleaning your windows?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How many times have you been to a restaurant or any other place of business, and the owner's there, and you can just sense that the owner's
yeah.
there, right? And you can just know it. There's that level of service, that extra little touch, and whenever the owner walks in, and he builds these initial touch points, like the window cleaning. Like I'll never forget meeting Steven. He was such a nice guy. He was the owner, and maybe he came and serviced it for the first 2 or 3 months. But then after that, he passed it along. But they don't care. They see his employees. They ask how Steven's doing,
Yeah.
and, it's just those initial touch points. And, having the owner being involved it means everything. And that's why franchises exist, that we need that owner's touch.
It's funny you should bring up the restaurant business because I grew up in the restaurant business, and my family owned restaurants, and everybody was always in the restaurant. And at the time, right, it was mostly still a cash business. And my uncle owned Italian restaurants from New York City on up to this town called Monticello, where they had a raceway, and every place in between. And that's all he ever did was go place to place to place to place to place to place. And he had his sons and stuff in there, and just constantly making sure. And I always thought that was the path I was going to take. And I went to college in Miami, and I was working in restaurants and hotels down there. And I thought, I don't want to do this for a living, because you got to be here like 14, 16 hours a day. You got to be here for lunch. You got to be here for dinner. You got to be here for closing. You got to watch exactly what's going on, or else you get, robbed blind. Right. And then, you get out of work, you get done, in a good restaurant, right? You get done at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you hang out with your friends, and nothing good ever happens at 1 o'clock in the morning. Next thing you know, you're strolling in at 6 a.m. and so that turned me off. But I still wanted to be in the food business. My first business was a food retail store, not in the restaurant business. But I screwed it up. I was a terrible leader and a terrible process manager. It was bad, and that was my first business. It was a total failure. I've talked about it a million times on this show, but it was a lesson, big, costly lesson that I had. But I think it set me up for, success in the future because I took those lessons that I learned, which, and applied them in all the other businesses. So, but,
Yeah.
still, no matter what business I did, you still had to be there. You still have to show up. You still have to manage. I don't care if you're managing by metrics or if you're managing by, process. You have to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're gonna have to manage. You have to be the puzzle solver. And
You got to
you
be a
know,
problem solver.
yeah, it's not gonna solve itself. It's your business, your baby. You got to figure it out, and it's not gonna do it on its own.
Yeah, but I think that what franchises, like I said, the beauty of what franchises provide is if I start a business from my idea, I have to figure out the minimum viable product. I have to figure out the product market fit. I have to figure out the process, the systems, all that stuff. When you buy a franchise, they've already done all that work. So you don't have to figure it out. Now all you have to do is execute and scale. And,
Yeah,
and so just follow the plan, execute, scale, do your marketing, get the customers in the door. And so that's the benefit to me where I
yeah.
see it.
I got really close to buying a concept called K9 Pet Resort. They're based out of New Jersey, and they're mostly sold out across the nation now. But I got really close with them, and I went to their Discovery Day, and where they bring in everybody who's interested, and so we toured their space in New Jersey. And again, it's just like they have like chandeliers and dog rooms and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
TVs, and I'm like, wow, this is like really high end for dogs. And that was kind of their thing, and that was what I thought their thing was. It was like, okay, it's just really nice rooms for dogs. Well, then like we walked to the back, and the two guys were brothers that started it. They're really nice, brilliant guys, and so we walk in and we kind of see this like play area, and it's fairly big, but they have dogs, and so it can get crowded. Well, they came up with this concept where they had like all these kennels that took over the play area, but then during the day, all the kennels collapsed into the wall, and it
Oh,
opened up the play area, and so now your capacity increased, and then you could house those dogs at night in the play area by having additional kennels. And I was like, okay, well that's actually brilliant. I would have never thought of that. And
yeah.
then they take us to the back, and they're like, whenever you're cleaning kennels, you actually need, this certain ingredient to clean them, but you can't put too much and you can't put too little. And so for 6, 7 years, we had, these high school kids that were dumping the ingredients into the water in the buckets and mixing it. And then all the dogs would just break out and they would start losing hair. And, he's like, and so we would lessen it, and then we put more and lessen it. He's like, so they got the machine that perfectly mixes it, and it was saving them like $30,000 a year,
Wow.
by just perfectly mixing the solution,
Yeah.
and again, like it's, things like that, if I would have went and opened up my own kennel, I would have never, it would have taken me a long time to figure that one out.
Yeah,
I just
there
thought
you
all
go.
the dog's hair was falling
Yeah.
out.
Oh, no question. Yeah. So how do people find you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is you can Google me, Charles Stovall, and a franchise, I'll pop up, but charlesstovall.com. I do go by Chuck as you introduced me, but charlesstovall.com. You can, have a free consultation with me. All my consultations are free. My fees are paid by the franchisor if we do a successful placement. But I'll talk to anybody. I'll help anybody navigate through this. All my services are no cost. But I do have a caveat with people where it will cost time. It does cost your time to make a life-changing decision, which is to go into business for yourself. So, but you can find me on charlesstovall.com, and all my socials will be on there as well.
Okay, great. And LinkedIn, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, I'm on LinkedIn, and again, just to help with the spelling, it's Charles and STOV as in Victor ALL. And so you can, like I said, if you Google me, I'll pop up and you can connect with me through there.
So there you have it. Anybody who's thinking about a franchise, call Charles and go to his website, get in touch with him. It's not going to cost you anything. You can start having discussions about it. But I think it's a great alternative. You know, a lot of you out there are always contacting us, asking about, you know, what businesses to start and things like that. And, you know, again, we can't come up with ideas for people, but maybe Charles can. Maybe he's got a whole bank of the types of franchises that'll get you started. So, and if you ever wondered if franchise ownership could be the right path for you, again, you know, give Charles a call. No pressure, no cost. Just give him a shout. And thanks for taking the time to come on. Again, we appreciate you taking the time and sharing with us.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah, my pleasure.